Okay, we're back on Ms. Johnson's case. Jury's not here, and I don't think we have Mr. Victor on the phone yet, do we?
I can right now.
Go ahead and call him. Let's get him on the line. And Ms. Andrews and Ms. Ramuno are here, and Detective Ramirez is here.
Mark?
Hi, Mr. Victor, this is Judge Kramer.
Hey, Judge.
We are on the record. Ms. Andrews, Ms. Ramuno are here, Detective Ramirez is here, and we're ready to talk about issues relating to the jail call with Elizabeth Johnson. Let me start by asking, what date was this call made on? It's not
Who are you asking, Judge?
anyone who can give me the correct answer.
Oh, okay.
I don't have that information.
The state is looking also. It's not on the transcript, I don't believe.
It is not, Your Honor.
It's, I can put the general time frame, obviously, because she's in jail in Miami, but beyond that, I don't know.
I arrived on the 7th and the 9th.
Your Honor, it's sometime between December 31st and January 9th.
Okay, so,
Sometime between December 31st and January 9th.
okay, obviously, we need to get the exact date before we play this for the jury. And the context of this call is that why don't you tell me the context? Because we have various people appearing. The transcript has some unidentified people. Why don't we identify who all the participants are with the key on the front? Some of the participants are identified. Q is John Thompson, which is Detective Thompson, correct?
Yes.
And then Q1, Sergio, and is that Special Agent?
No, Your Honor, that is, what's happening in this call is Tammy Smith, Jack Smith, and Elizabeth Johnson's grandfather, Robert Johnson, agreed to participate in a phone call by calling Elizabeth Johnson at the jail in Miami. This was monitored by KPHO.
Hang on one second. For Mr. Victor,
Yes.
I don't know if you can do it with your speaker or not, but you're bleeding through the sound, so you got to put it on mute, and that way your sound won't bleed into us, because it is right now, and it's distracting, and it may prevent you from being able to hear us. I don't know, but can you do that so we don't get your noise?
Yes, Judge.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
And
So you left off with this was monitored by KPHO?
this was monitored by KPHO. I believe, I'm not sure if it was their idea or whose idea it was, but they were a participant in this. Detective Thompson was notified that this was going to occur, so he was in a van with Sergio listening to this as it was occurring. So the recording is actually, that we have, is from the van listening in on this call to the jail in Miami.
Sergio is someone with the Tempe Police Department?
No, I believe they're with KPHO.
Okay, so with the knowledge of KPHO, Detective Thompson's listening in. Okay, so Q4 is Tammy Smith, Q6 is Jack Smith, Q7 it says man, that's actually Elizabeth Johnson's grandfather, is it not? Robert Johnson, I think?
No, I believe Q7. And this is certainly something we intended on clearing up before presenting it to the jury.
I believe you're correct, Judge, that
Yes,
it
it
is
is.
Q's grandfather.
It is. And Q5 is somebody from KPHO.
Okay. Well, we probably need to identify Q5. Who are Qs 2 and 3, the man and man generically?
People in the van. I believe that they are additionally people in the van.
So Q Q1, 2, and 3 are in the van basically listening in?
Yes.
Judge, if I can clarify this for you a little bit, what had happened was actually Channel 5 did this interview. They recorded it at the Smith. They then brought it to Tempe PD, who then recorded it in a van. So the beginning recording isn't even part of the KPHO thing. The beginning of the recording is actually the KPHO people explaining to Detective Thompson, and I think it was Detective Duplessis, I think is also in there, explaining to them what happens with the call and when it started up and how to operate the recording. And then they did a separate recording of the KPHO recording, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. I guess my question is, are we really going to play that part for the jury? Is it to put it in context, and maybe can we just explain it and get right to the recording?
Yeah, we don't need to play that portion, Your Honor.
Okay, because I read that, and the first 2 pages, the discussion between the folks in the van, that's a problem. So it looks like the interview picks up essentially at page 3, right in the middle of Ms. Johnson answering. Actually, it's page 3 at the top. Tammy Smith is saying hello, and then Ms. Johnson starts saying what you were trying to say. I think that's the first time anyone who's not a van person appears on the transcript. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so I think what I'd like to do, unless somebody has a problem with it for some reason, is we should start the tape for the jury where we start at line 95 on page 3. And that starts the actual interview. And if you want to, I don't know if you even need to set it up and tell them about, and maybe there can be testimony from, I guess, Detective Thompson about how they came about it, and he can explain what you just explained. Okay, so if we start at page 3, line 95, then we have everyone identified. Tammy Smith, Q5 is someone from KPHO. We probably should identify that person for the jury individually, who it is. Then Q6 is Jack Smith. Q7 is Robert Johnson, who is Elizabeth Johnson's grandfather. And then A is Elizabeth Johnson. Okay. All right, so we got that out of the way. It looks to me that the first dispute with respect to, well, let me step back one more time. Is the rest of what's appearing in here been agreed to by everybody to be played except for what you flagged for me, or is there some other things that you haven't flagged for me that you've agreed to remove already? You understand what I'm saying?
But we did have some discussion about trying to remove the recording of the Miami-Dade jail coming in. And I'm not sure, did we resolve that?
I think we decided
Charity,
we
did we
didn't need to.
Did we decide we were going to leave that in?
Well, we kind of came to the conclusion, I don't know that it's absolutely necessary to remove it, and then there are other portions of the context that we want and that do elicit the fact that she is in custody and in jail at the time. So I don't know if we need to do it or not. I don't think it's crucial.
I don't think so either, and I don't want you to go through the effort when I think it's of minimal value, since it will be explained to the jury, or that they will immediately understand that she's in custody at the time in Miami. And so hearing that recording in the background doesn't trouble me, and if someone was making an argument that it had to be out, I'd probably disagree with that. So let's not worry about that part. Okay, so let's get to what's in dispute. I think we start at page 7, is that correct?
Yes.
And we start with line 277, where Jack Smith is apparently making a semi-speech to Elizabeth Johnson, and I take it, Ms. Clark, you want that out?
Yes, Judge, and I think, I don't believe your earlier question was answered completely. There are other sections that we have agreed with the state that will come out, in fact, even just prior to that, which kind of is a reason why we're requesting that this section of what the grandfather is saying comes out as well. On the page prior, on page 6, we've agreed with the state to take out portions, I believe the state agreed with lines 250 to 252, if I'm correct, where he's saying, where the grandfather says that I'm sick to my stomach because I really am having a hard time believing you in this.
Okay, slow down, because this is being, we're taking this down, and you keep referring to the grandfather. This is Jack Smith doing the talking here.
Sorry, you're right, Jack Smith, I apologize.
Okay, so I will tell you that my note, and I've had about 5 minutes before I came in here to review this. My first note on page 7 was, how is this different from previous page? If all that stuff was going to come in with Jack Smith giving a big long speech about her status, how is what's on page 7 any different? In fact, I think things said the previous page are not a lot more of an issue, and I don't see too much relevance in Jack Smith's speech about what he thinks is important to Elizabeth Johnson.
Right. Well, Your Honor, on the previous page, page 6, he talks about her going to jail for the rest of her life, and that's the reason why we are in agreement with taking that section out.
Right.
In this section on page 7, he's just talking about her taking a fall for what she's done, and I think it's important to the context of the whole conversation and the context of the relationship between all these parties.
Well, but Jack Smith telling her, there's some 403 issue there with Jack Smith's opinion that she's about to take a big fall. I have some concerns about that. The rest of his statements, I've never told you a lie, and I told you one day you'll face this. And I guess it's got some limited relevance, but I just worry about Jack Smith's speech. He is also not a co-conspirator, so.
Your Honor, that's actually incorrect. A co-conspirator can be charged or uncharged. It's our position he is a co-conspirator. The law specifically allows statements of charged or uncharged co-conspirators, and the way this is charged in this case, there is no named co-conspirator in the indictment.
Okay.
Not only is Jack Smith a co-conspirator, but anybody else she might have conspired with could be a co-conspirator in this case, such as a couple in a park or Janet Morris.
Okay. Ms. Clark, tell me why you want that portion out, and is it the whole portion or just some specific portion?
Well, Judge, I think Elisa actually kind of hit it on the head there. I'm talking about context here, and I think you've alluded to that as well. We're agreeing to take out the entire part prior to this, where Jack is speaking about Elizabeth going to jail for the rest of her life, and we've agreed that that needs to come out. This section is just a continuation of that conversation, and his saying you're going to take a very big fall for this is related back to that previous section. section. There is no context outside of that other section. To put this in is putting it in completely out of context because we've already removed the section prior to it. And there isn't much relevance to it, especially when you take out that prior section. So our main concern here is being worried about the baby because I don't believe you. Or if you're telling the truth, you're going to take a very big fall for this. That's relating back to his prior statement.
Well, it does certainly relate back to the page before. I think this particular paragraph's got a real limited amount of relevance because Jack Smith's not really talking about, there's not a lot of co-conspirator talk happening here. Assuming he's an unindicted co-conspirator and it comes in, I just don't like the paragraph. And I don't think it adds anything in terms of relevance to the discussion. It doesn't really qualify or explain the future exchange either, such that we need it. So I want to take out that paragraph. So I'm going to sustain the objection, and we're taking out 277 to 281. Okay, there's another.
We'll take out up to 283 because then otherwise she's just saying yeah out of nowhere.
I agree.
Judge, I'd just like the record to be clear that we don't agree that Jack Smith is an unindicted co-conspirator. I mean, there's never been any such finding. The issue hasn't come up. The court hasn't made a ruling. I don't know if we're going to need to make that ruling today or at any time, but I don't want the record to reflect that we agree with that.
I note there has not been a ruling on that, and I'm not intending on making one today. So I note your position. Okay. Page 7. And by the way, Ms. Johnson has waived her presence for today, correct?
That is correct, Judge.
Okay. So we have just one line at the bottom of page 7. That's a KPHO person making a statement, correct?
Correct.
I'm not excited about having the KPHO guy's statement. I know it's, in fact, that's not a question, it's a statement. Saying that you can't just hand over a baby like you would hand over your old pair of clothing. I'm not particularly excited about that. It puts into context, of course, the statement made on the next page, but
Yeah, it's the state's position that under Rule 106 it's admissible because it provides context to her answer up on the next page. And in this part of the conversation, they're trying essentially to talk some sense into her about what she's saying, and I think it's important.
Judge, I don't think it puts into context, and it's not necessary to put in context what the next page is. In fact, the part where Elizabeth says, I understand, I know what you're referencing it to, but, and I mean, we can take that portion out if we take out the Channel 5 person, which is additionally hearsay, but it was a private adoption, and I really understand that's how it works, which relates back to Tammy speaking prior to that about it not being a private adoption, and everyone commending her Elizabeth saying everyone commended her prior to what she was doing when she was going to give Gabriel to Tammy. That statement's not necessary for the context. It's hearsay. It's extremely prejudicial. It's not relevant either.
okay. Here's what I think. I agree with the defense that really Elizabeth, I think, on page 8 is answering Tammy Smith at the bottom, saying, but it's not a private adoption that, and I'm at the bottom of page 7, and Elizabeth says, it is. That's how it works. That comment at the bottom is simply a comment that I don't think Elizabeth is responding to. I don't think it's hearsay because I don't think the state's offering it for the truth of the matter asserted, but really for 403 purposes, it almost comes out that way, where this person's making a comment. I really do think it adds no context. In fact, it's just a comment by the Channel 5 person, and I think it ought to come out. Without that, I think it flows actually better from Tammy Smith to Elizabeth. So 313 through 315 are coming out on page 7. Okay, the next one I think we have is page 9. The grandfather, Robert Johnson, talking about the car, where it was found.
as we discussed in chambers, the issue with this is it's partially impeachment testimony. I mean, it's impeachment here. It's being offered for the truth of the matter, which, to me, it's hearsay. And additionally, it's not relevant. And there is no tape that's going to be presented to the jury. So it leaves the jury wondering, what is this tape of other statements out there that are contradictory? I think that, based on hearsay, based on not being relevant, and additionally based on being prejudicial, I don't see that it should come in.
Here's my concern. Robert Johnson's making statements about what he thinks Elizabeth Johnson said, statements made on tape, or she said something. I'm worried about that Robert Johnson's doing the questioning.
And Your Honor, it's my memory that she said it to Robert Johnson. It's his car. He was looking for the car, and she told him it was in a garage.
And we have no objection to taking out the part about it being on tape.
Well, are you going to introduce some testimony, or do you have something where she says it's in a garage? Because if you don't, and we just have Robert Johnson saying you said it in a garage, I don't want to go there, especially because we're impeaching on, I wouldn't call it a collateral issue, but pretty close to a collateral issue, the car. I understand the state's arguing her whole story, the impeachment of everything she's telling about what happened is relevant, and I generally agree with that. But now we're going to Robert Johnson impeaching her about the car. We're starting to move away from squarely relevant from my perspective. Okay, hold on for 1 second while we're changing paper. Miss Clark, while we're changing paper, make sure you slow down because we're flying.
Flying, and I don't have a copy of what you're referring to, and it's...
Do we have another copy here so you can see what we're talking about? Okay, go ahead and get it. We're going to hold on. We're making it very difficult to transcribe this by the speed at which we're all moving, and we need to slow down. So Ms. Andrews is getting a copy of this, so we're waiting for a moment.
It's going to be lengthy. I thought it was just going to be like 15 minutes.
We're about halfway through. There's 3 more after this, I think. Theoretically, I have a pretty good idea, but I don't know. Page 9, and we're talking about lines 382 through 392. Okay. All right, so we're back on the record. Let's all make a commitment to slowing down. All right. So I've expressed some concern, and let me talk to the state about the whole the potential confusion factor and the lack of relevance of Robert Johnson cross-examining Elizabeth Johnson on her previous statements regarding where she put the car. As I say that, I'm less convinced of the relevance of that and more worried about the 403.
And Your Honor, where I believe it comes into context, and I don't have the transcript with me to look at, is Robert Johnson visited her in jail, and she told him that, and he relayed that information to the police because they were trying to figure out at one point in time where the car was. And so that's why I believe we have that Robert Johnson says that it's on a recording, that it's in the garage because of a conversation he had with Elizabeth Johnson that was recorded. We weren't intending to play that recording.
Well, but he didn't see her in Florida.
He did not, no.
Okay, so was this a conversation he had later or before with her?
Well, that's a good point.
So
Then maybe it was on the telephone. I can't recall at the moment. I do recall there's information Elizabeth Johnson gave to Robert Johnson that his car was safe in a garage. And that's what he's referring to.
Not all impeachment obviously is going to be relevant. That's why we have 404. And I understand here it's part of her story, and to the extent she's inconsistent with the story, it quite possibly could be fair game. But because of the 403 possibilities of it's her grandfather who's referencing a recording that's not going to come in here, and the 403 of we got you on tape with both of those, there's, again, the car in the garage is not that big of a deal because they go on and talk about it again. So he questions her at length about the car. So we're not giving up on the car here, just this sequence. Let's take out, I just don't like the 382 to 392 sequence, so we're going to take that out on page...
Judge, I don't know that we need to take out the 382.
We don't.
But the 384.
Correct.
Okay.
It's 384 to 393 comes out on page 9. Okay, the next one, we go forward to, let everybody get there, page 22. And I think we're talking about line 977 and 978. I don't, and Ms. Clark, you can tell me, why would that come out, or need to come out?
Judge, again, this is a context issue. This is Tammy continuing her statement from 959 to 961, and I realize you don't have this information, but we have agreed with the state to take out this portion where Tammy says, so it's not a kidnapping, but very soon it will be a homicide if they don't have a body. And she's continuing on down here later on. It's the continuation of this conversation, explaining that it's not a homicide. It's a homicide unless they have to look at his body. They have to look at his body to see that he's alive and well and breathing. So given the context, this will be completely taken out of context without 959 through 961, which I don't see how that can come in, and the state's already agreed that doesn't come in. We're not dealing with a homicide, and we're not, we're trying to focus the jury away from this as a homicide.
I disagree, because I think the context is established by Tammy Smith saying, well, let's start at 971. Elizabeth Johnson says her story's been verified, and then Tammy Smith says, I know, but they have to verify that the baby's alive, is what she's saying. I don't think it does necessarily relate back to the 959, line 959 statements that came out. I don't think it goes back to the homicide. I think it fairly is Tammy Smith responding right there to Elizabeth Johnson saying, my story's been verified, and Tammy Smith says they have to look at his body in order to verify, is what she's saying. And they have to look at his body to see that he's alive and well and breathing, to verify your story. That's what she's talking about.
Well, Judge, maybe to be fair then we need to take out that section of Elizabeth speaking, because she's responding to Elizabeth, or to Tammy, saying it's not a kidnapping, it's going to be a homicide if they don't have his body. Her response is, I gave him away. There is no body. I gave him away, and my story's been verified. She's responding to Tammy's statement about it being a homicide, and Tammy is responding again, saying, yes, but because they don't have a body, I think it is all context into this homicide. Elizabeth is trying to explain to Tammy why it shouldn't be a homicide, while Tammy is trying to explain to Elizabeth why it should be a homicide.
But I don't think the jury needs all that context to understand what Elizabeth Johnson is saying there. And we could have started with just a statement of her saying, I gave him away and my story's already been verified, and the jury will know exactly what she's talking about. And so I don't think we need the context, or otherwise it's unfair to not have the context that leads up to that discussion, because it goes into, in my view, another overarching topic. That is, she said she gave the baby away, and she says the story's been verified. It doesn't matter, in my view, what led up to that statement in terms of putting it into fair context for the jury. So I think 977 and 78 can come in. All right, next page. Page 23, and the request is Tammy Smith, lines 987 right at the top to 990. Let me read this again. Okay, I don't see a whole lot of mischief here compared with other statements. Ms. Clark, is this the same reason, because of the lack of context?
Well, that was one of the reasons, Judge, but additionally, Tammy's making a statement on behalf of Detective Ramirez that I don't know is wholly accurate, saying that this, and in fact it's not wholly accurate, saying that this will all go away if they find Gabriel alive and breathing. Given the charges that she has, that's not even factual. If he's found alive and breathing, as we've discussed before, where he's found and where he is, and considering we're asking the jury not to focus on his whereabouts and whether or not that pertains to any elements of the crime, I think this clearly should come out. Whether he's found alive and breathing has no relevance as to whether or not this entire thing goes away. And her saying that the detective is saying, so long as the baby's found alive and breathing, this all goes away, I think it creates some prejudice, especially given the instructions we've already discussed regarding Gabriel's whereabouts not being relevant.
I actually think the state might want this out because it's a suggestion by Tammy Smith inaccurately that if the baby shows up, everything's fine. I don't think the state thinks that that would have been the case.
I don't read this as saying that this is all going to go away. It's saying that this can be over with. They're looking for this baby. If they can find where he is, then this whole ordeal will be over. Not that charges are going to go away.
Yeah, I think Tammy Smith thinks that everything's fine, meaning you're not going to have any problems. I take it as an inaccurate, shockingly, statement by Tammy Smith that Detective Ramirez is going to say, if I know where the baby is, it's all over, meaning we don't have any need for you, Elizabeth. And that, I don't think, was ever the position that Detective Ramirez would have taken under the circumstances. And so I'm worried about this. It's basically a legal opinion, in part, by Tammy Smith, and I think it can be confusing. And so I think it should come out.
The only problem we have then is that Elizabeth's answer at 992, she's putting it on the police department to find him at that point, and there's absolutely no context to that statement then, because the previous statement is...
I think that's okay, and maybe this is a little bit of a bailout. I will tell you, there's lots of statements that arguably don't have context that are made in this tape. Okay.
Actually, now that I look at the previous statement, I think we're fine.
Okay, so page 23, lines 987 through 990 come out. Okay, last one. Page 26. Again, it's the Channel 5 person, and this is line 1147 through 1149. Do you know how serious that looks against you? I'm obviously very hesitant to have the comments of the media saying, do you know how serious this is?
And Judge, I think there may have been, I don't know if we failed to put this into our email to Angela and to the state about lines 1141 through 1143, which is the beginning of the Channel 5 statement. He says, but do you understand how serious this is because of what Tammy is telling you that right now because you said you killed your son? And again, this relates to his conversation later and prior about this being a homicide. He's talking about it being serious for that reason. And as you said, it's Channel 5, and his comments as to how serious this is, I think, are irrelevant and prejudicial.
Well, I think there's some big-time relevance, though, in Elizabeth Johnson's answer at 1145. I wanted him to leave me alone. So...
Well, I think we would be okay with taking out the part, his statement about, the Channel 5 statement about how serious it is in both of those. That's our main concern. And leaving some of the rest of it for context.
Okay, so what are you proposing to take out specifically? Give me the line numbers.
I think we could take out 1141 going into the very first word of 1142. And then, let's see, 1147 through 1149. I don't know if you can take out just a portion of that without it sounding completely strange. but I don't know that that entire portion is necessary if you have the remainder of 1142 through 1143 for context.
Okay, what does the state think?
Okay, so the proposal is to take out in line 1141, but do you understand how serious this is because of what Tammy is telling you?
Correct.
Do we have no objection to that?
Okay, so 1141, that line will come out, and it will begin with that right now because you said you killed your son because you don't know where he is, stays in. And then the answer to 1145 stays in. The next issue is 1147.
And I forget what the proposal was on that.
I don't know if there's a way to just take out the portion where he's talking, where the Channel 5 is speaking about how serious it is against her without the rest of it being out of context. And then I think that would bring us into the very first three words of 1151 of Elizabeth's response to make it sound like it fits, where he says, so Channel 5 says, I understand, but hear me out. You send a text message that said you killed your son. You're telling us now you don't know where he is. Do you know how serious that looks against you? I suppose we could just cut out after the comma on 1149, the do you know how serious that looks against you? And then on 1151, the beginning of Elizabeth's reply that says, I really don't.
We have no objection to that.
The state's okay with that. So we're taking out part of line 1149, the clause, do you know how serious that looks against you? And then we're taking out on line 1151, Elizabeth Johnson's statement, quote, I really don't. And then the tape will start with you know. Is that correct?
The defense agrees with that.
And the state, I think, is indicating it agrees also. Okay, that's all I have. Is there anything else from anybody's perspective that we need to talk about on this?
Not from the state.
No, Judge, not from the defense.
Okay, all right, then I think we're good.
Please tell us your full name.
Annalisa Urias.
And Annalisa, don't tell me your address, but where do you currently live? What city and state?
San Antonio, Texas.
Were you living in San Antonio, Texas in December of 2009?
Yes.
And you don't need to tell me exactly where you work, but what do you do for a living?
I work in the fast food industry.
Now, back in December of 2009, when you were living in San Antonio, Texas, who did you live with at that time?
My boyfriend and his mother.
And what is your boyfriend's name?
Christopher Carrion.
And what is his mother's name?
Patricia de la Rosa.
And during some time period where you were living with your boyfriend and his mother, did his brother ever live there as well?
Yes, he did.
And what's his brother's name?
Daniel de la Rosa.
While you were living with your boyfriend and his mother and your boyfriend's brother, what type of telephone did you have?
Me and my boyfriend shared a phone. Cell phone.
It was a cell phone?
Yes.
And so you and your boyfriend used the same phone?
Yes.
And whose name was the phone under? Who paid the
His
bill?
mother, Patricia.
So it would have been under Patricia de la Rosa?
Yes.
Did you have your name listed in a plan somehow?
Not at the time.
And was it a shared plan, or did you just all use the same phone number?
It was a shared plan.
And so there was one plan with different phone numbers?
Yes.
And then you and your boyfriend had the same phone number?
Yes. We shared a phone at the time.
Now, back in December of 2009, did you have a Craigslist ad?
Yes.
What was that for?
For babysitting, I used to do babysitting.
Now, why don't you tell us a little bit about, in case anybody's not familiar with how Craigslist works, tell us about how you placed that ad.
Basically, you just sign up with your email and your phone number, and you can put ads for stuff for sale, from cars to like computers, anything that you're not using you can place for sale. It also has a section for babysitting, pets. It's just like a community website where you can buy things and get services from. So I signed up for that and placed the ad for babysitting.
And generally, what did your ad say about babysitting?
Basically said that I babysit, that I'm available anytime, any days, and that's about it. And I had my number for contact.
And how old are you today?
21.
And so about how old were you in December of 2009?
I think I had just turned 18.
So back during that time, around December 21st of 2009, did you receive a phone call in response to that ad?
Yes.
And when you received that phone call, did the person identify themselves to you?
Yes.
And how did the person identify themselves?
As Elizabeth?
And so you talked to someone named Elizabeth?
Yes.
Did Elizabeth tell you her last name?
No.
And when you talked to Elizabeth on the phone on that day, what conversation did you have with her?
She basically said that she needed a babysitter for the following day so she can look for work because she had just moved here. Or not here. She had just moved to San Antonio.
And did she tell you at the time where she had moved from?
No.
And so did you agree to babysit the next day?
Yes, I did.
Where was it that she wanted you to babysit?
The Homegate studio?
And is that also in San Antonio, Texas?
Yes.
So did you end up then going to the Homegate?
Yes.
And how did you get there?
I got there on the bus. The
Did you
city
go-
bus.
Did you go by yourself?
No, my boyfriend went with me
Okay, and why did he go with you?
because I didn't know how to take the bus and he did. So he went all the way with me to show me how to get there.
And that's very nice.
Yeah.
When you got to the Homegate Hotel, did your boyfriend go with you inside the hotel?
No, he stayed on the bus and went back around.
As you're sitting here today, do you recall what room number you met with Elizabeth?
I don't recall the room number.
Do you recall talking to some police officers back in December 2009 and January of 2010?
Yes,
And if you had told them the room number was 150, would that be correct?
that would be correct. I just don't remember now.
And do you remember approximately what time of day it was that you arrived at the hotel?
It was between 11:30 and 12 p.m.
During the time period after you had talked to Elizabeth on the phone and before you arrived at the hotel, did you have any communication with her?
Yes.
And what type of communication did you have with her?
We were texting back and forth while I was on my way there.
And what were you texting about?
I was basically just telling her that I was running late and why the bus was running late.
And then eventually you arrived at the home gate and you went into room 150 without your boyfriend.
Yes.
What happened when you met Elizabeth?
She was kind of mad because I was late.
And when you say she was mad at you because you were